All right, you all still have your bubbles? Okay, here is the rules to the game. Every time, or I should say, are these the rules to the game? Because every time I ask a question in the reflection that I'm about to give, every time I ask a question of any kind, I need y'all to blow bubbles. Okay? If you'd like to. Personally, I was hyperventilating because I was blowing the bubbles a little bit too aggressively, so pace yourself maybe, but every time I ask a question, see if you can blow a bubbles. Is that clear? It was clear for one of you. Two of you, okay. Do you understand the rules? All right. So the quest for the Grail is one of the coolest, but also most enduring and psychologically loaded tales in all the Western canon. It has somehow never lost relevance or appeal. Its themes are timeless, and what that means is that they are also always timely. They speak to us now. Today's Easter, that day on the Christian calendar that celebrates the indomitability of compassion in the resurrection of their hero. And thus in ourselves, because we are, in some sense, the protagonist of any tale. And so the Easter story attaches a moral dimension to the more ancient recognition of earthly renewal that has, from time immemorial, resounded in the spiritual lesson of spring. All of that is also present in the story of the Grail Quest. The Grail story is about many things, but it hinges on the question, how do we renew? How do we heal? How do we revitalize both ourselves and our world? For it understands there is little distinction between the two, between ourselves and the world, from both an ecological and a spiritual point of view. And that is the question before us, culturally, personally, nationally. How do we revitalize? And it has seldom been more pressing a question than it is right now. So the written tale of the Grail dates to around the 12th century. But the story itself is more like a collection of tributaries that come together from a deep pool of even more ancient wisdom. Embryos of the Grail Quest exist in cultures as far-flung from each other as Persia and the Celts. And where the tale, which is where the tale has finally seemed to have rooted. And the tale predates Christian influence and yet assimilates into Christian cosmology like a stowaway carrying treasure that is not on the ship's manifest. And there's also something of a prequel that I think will help us digest a more nuanced understanding of our role in this tale. We already understand that the Fisher King was the heart of the land. That's often true in a tale of this kind. The highest and most noble of the human is in deep accord and sympathy with the land. They reflect one another. But if he was the heart, if the king was the heart of the land, the spring-fed waterways were the circulatory system. So these springs were tended by maidens, spiritual beings called the voices of the springs. And should a wary traveler and who is not a wary traveler, approach with the appropriate respect, the maidens would offer them a goblet filled with their spring water and ask the question, would you like some nourishment? Of course, that liquid is both symbolic and literal, sort of like the bubbles you're blowing. Water as a medium of the ecological soul. Ancient and earth-centered cultures around the world have known that springs are sites of spiritual emergence, grace-given thresholds into the deeper order of the world. So think about that next time you're in Manitou. So where are the springs in your life? Where is the life-giving nourishment, spiritual or otherwise, that you had no part in creating? Are you ignoring them? Are you approaching them with humility and reverence? For once upon a time, there was a king who did not. He did not abide by the custodial traditions of respect and reverence when approaching the voices of the wells. He saw in their grace and graceful giving only the opportunity for power. Sounds familiar. And so he and his men took the maidens and made them theirs in all the worst ways. And untended, the springs dried up. The land became barren. Was this the Fisher King? Or was this the act by which the Fisher King found himself wounded? Maybe. Like the water of the springs, the land in this tale is both literal and metaphorical. It really is the land, but it is also the soul, our soul. So what's the matter with the land is what's the matter with the soul. Sort of a question. And that's the whole thing right there. What's the matter with the land, the world, the nation, the cosmos, the ecosphere, the congregation, your relationships? What's the matter with those is what's the matter with the soul. The archetype of the king is plain and well known. It's about benevolent energy through responsibility and duty. So keep in mind that the king is the land in human form, as well as the highest of human agency. Meanwhile, the maidens resonate along the lines of emotional relationship, from love to reverence to heartbreak. So for me, the feminine in this story, including eventually the Grail itself, stands for benevolent relationship and the open-heartedness and reverence required of it. And here is the instruction of the tale: to cultivate a healthy ecological soul that is a soul in healthy resonance with our contents, our contexts, and our ecosphere. To become a worthy king, we need these qualities: open-heartedness, reverence, and responsibility. Particularly with regards to the land, open-heartedness, reverence, and responsibility. So next time you are in a setting that we might refer to as nature, ask yourself, is my perceptive heart open? Am I in a state of reverence? How can I be responsible while here? These are the questions that Percival failed to ask. Percival, the protagonist, which is to say, us. When you remember to ask these questions, you will be prepared to be in deep conversation with not only the land, but with your own soul. For these qualities scaffold the Grail. Of course, as the central symbol, the Grail is the source from which invigoration, both personal and ecological, flow. It is the abundance and grace of the world in all its procreative flourishing. And our own chalice, the central symbol of our spiritual tradition, shares, of course, a strong resemblance and resonance to the Grail. They are both feminine symbols in their contours and functions. Water bearers, vessels of life, keepers of light. They carry our spiritual essence. In some early versions of the tale, having watched this strange parade bearing the Grail and having then failed to ask the healing question, Percival simply goes home, defeated. And that's where it ends. Later iterations have different endings, like the one that we heard today, and it actually have sometimes different characters, but the bones of this tale end in the hero's, which is to say our, failure. There's no magical restoration. There's no resurrection. In this way, it reminds me of the Gospel of Mark, which before later additions ends not with a resurrection, but simply with an empty tomb, a hollow, an empty cup, a question. But nature and stories abhors a vacuum. And so an empty tomb, an empty cup, an empty quest is actually a trick ending. It isn't an ending at all. Rather, it's a call. For in fact, the Grail has been revealed. The Grail is at last not an object, but a question. What's the matter? How can I help? That question is the Grail. And when we are open-hearted and reverent and responsible, we are able to ask it with effect. How do we restore the land? How do we heal the king from which all abundance flows? How do we redeem ourselves and revitalize the world? How do we respect the voices of the springs? How do we mend our soul and the land? Unveil the Grail, which is the question, what's the matter? How can I help? So look around in our world, our city, our community, your home, your heart. There is beauty in all of those places, yes, but also pain. And where you see pain, where you see the need for healing, where you see struggle, ask yourself, is my perceptive heart open? Am I in a state of reverence? How can I be responsible while here? And then once oriented by those questions, you may ask, what's the matter? How can I help? Now, these questions actually cannot be asked separately from one another, and will continually refine one another. How open is my heart? Am I reverent? Am I behaving responsibly? Are my relationships and actions benevolent? You guys are probably lightheaded by now. If your heart is open, if you are reverent, if you are prepared to act responsibly, if you are oriented toward benevolence, then you are ready to unveil the Grail. You are ready to ask what's the matter in a way that knows the difference between worry and care, between self-interested concern and compassion. Now, I hasten to add that this is not a question that requires an immediate answer or diagnosis. Percival was appropriately befuddled before the Grail. What's the matter is more of an orientation. It's more of an opportunity to listen than to fix. As a question, it is more of a declaration of intent, a posture, a perspective of reciprocity and receptivity. The how can I help part two. Sometimes it is enough to ask, to allow your generosity of presence to call out the bounty of the land, which is also your soul, your context, your congregation, your quest. What's the matter? How can I help? Here lies our restoration. Here lies life itself returned. Happy Easter. Enjoy your Grail Quest or hunting for Easter eggs.